Thank you all for attending. I appreciate you coming by. What we're going to talk about today is entrepreneurship through acquisition. So, most of the time, when people think about entrepreneurship, particularly out of Carnegie Mellon, they think of startups, they think of high tech, and things like that. What we're going to talk about is not that, but another path to entrepreneurship, and that's through the acquiring of another business. The key thing here is you got to ask yourself is, do you want to be a CEO? So I bring that up because, there's a lot of aspects of being a CEO, and it's something that you really need to be driven to do, particularly if you're going to do an acquisition of a company that already exists and take over the leadership of a company that already has people part of it. So unlike a startup where you start to hire people, et cetera, this is walking into a business that already exists. But it is a path to entrepreneurship. And as Allison said, I went to school here for my master's, and I went here specifically, and I have to call this out every time I do this. Back there, it says the Donald H. Jones Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. That was funded by Don Jones, one of Pittsburgh's premier entrepreneurs. He's why I came to this school. When he started that entrepreneurial center, I had a small business. It was really small. It was a mom and pop type operations. My wife and I were running it. And I walked into the store one day and my wife said, "You should go to this school." And she held up that Don was starting the Center for Entrepreneurship. I did. I got here and I didn't know really what I was going to do because I don't have a creative bone in my body. As Allison said, and this is no offense to our accounting friends, I have an accounting undergraduate degree. So I'm pretty much like, not out there figuring out the next best thing. So part of my classes was, I had to come up with a project for entrepreneurship and I didn't know what to do. And by that time I knew Don. I went to Don and I said, "Don, I have no idea. What do I do?" And he said, "It's very simple, Len. There's all these businesses that were started in Western Pennsylvania back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He said, find one where the owner's in their late 60s or 70s. They want to retire. They don't have a succession plan. Buy the business and grow it." And I said, "Wow, is that possible?" He said, "Absolutely is." So that's what I did. That was my project while I was in school here. I looked at 4 businesses while I was here. It took me a little bit longer then because there were not programs like this, but eventually bought a business after I graduated, which was McKnight Cylinder. Since that time, I've bought Uncle Charlie's Sausage, then as Allison said, the George Howe Company, and then we put 2 more businesses in there. The reason I give you that background is twofold. The first is I am not here to talk like an investor. I'm not here as a private equity person. I'm an operator. It's like when we buy a business, I go in and operate it. So we don't have like a portfolio of businesses, my business partner and I, Jim, because we're operators. We get in and run the business. So that's part of being a CEO is you got to think about it as a career path where you're going to actually operate the business. So why am I here? Pretty much to spread the word that this is possible. Most recently, it was said that over 25% of small businesses in the United States are currently owned by somebody who's over 65 years old. That means there's a huge opportunity for these businesses to continue. And some of them have family members that will take over. That's fine. Some will sell to private equity. I hope not. But there is an opportunity for people like you to go out and find these companies and buy them. So I got a little ahead of myself, but we'll back up to the path to entrepreneurship. The options are, as I mentioned earlier, you could do a new venture creation. I think it's great that the Sports Center promotes that and allows people to come here, share their ideas. I've had students of mine who have asked, they say, "I don't have an idea, but I want to work with a startup." You have that opportunity to do that here. Business acquisition is what I'm going to talk about. The other thing is there's franchising. You'd be surprised how many businesses out there are franchises. And just about anything you can think of that you want to do has a franchise opportunity. The advantage to franchising is that you get basically a business plan, a proven business plan that as my younger brother who sells franchises says, You're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So that's a category, also a path to entrepreneurship that you could work. Okay. Um, we're not going to talk a lot about franchising today, but if you're interested, let me know. I'd be happy to follow up with you. The last thing I put up here, I always stick this in just as a reminder. There is social entrepreneurship. And if you Google it, it'll tell you what it is, or I guess no more Google. I think we Perplexity or AI it or whatever you want to call it now. But social entrepreneurship is a path forward too, where you have you're doing some good, but you're not operating like a nonprofit. You're operating for profit. One of the best examples of that is Tom's Shoes, if you're familiar with that. Whereas if you buy a pair of Tom's shoes, they donate a pair of shoes to somebody in a third world country who doesn't have shoes. So there's all kinds of programs like that. So as an entrepreneur wannabe, you have to think, what's the best one of these that works for you? If you have a great idea, go for it. Do a new venture creation. There's certainly a lot of resources here to allow that. If you're like me and you don't have any great new ideas, there's the path of either franchising or business acquisition. Okay. In business acquisition, it's very simple. It's essentially it's a small private equity deal. But remember, you will have stock, but you're going to be more than that. You're going to be the operator. The simple steps are you go out, you raise money, you raise debt, equity investments, you identify target companies, narrow your search and perform due diligence. It's always best to understand everything about the business because while there are a lot of businesses out there, there are some that are not so good. Negotiate a deal, close on it, and then start to run it. And as a CEO, it's a combination of many skill sets. It's strategy, which is really fun. It's taking a company that exists and figuring out how to take it to the next level. Certainly understanding the finances of it, making sure that you can make payroll the next time it's due and that you can fund growth. Negotiations all along the way and understanding the operations of the business. One of the things that I don't put up there, but you do through all of this, is selling. And I don't mean selling like as a salesperson, although you could do that. But it's constantly communicating with your investors, the bank, your customers, your vendors, your employees, the whole thing across the board. By the way, as we go through this, there's a number of you here, and I know there's a number of you on Zoom. I do really well with questions going through this. You can save your question to the end, that's fine. But if something comes up and you have a specific question, raise your hand or on Zoom, let Allison know. I'd be happy to make this more of a dialogue instead of a monologue. I always feel I talk too much. And so it's always good to hear from some of you. Okay? Is that a deal? All right, thanks. I got an okay from back there. All right. All right. Here's the good news. The thing that I liked, having my very first business I had, the one I said that was a mom and pop, that was a startup. And I learned a lot of lessons there. And the advantage to buying a business that's already operating is that you buy cash flow. In other words, it's not like a startup where you have to, live in your parents' basement, eat peanut butter sandwiches, and, wait for the big payoff 5 or 7 years later. The day you buy the business, there's generally customers, there's money coming in, you're sending products out. So it's great because it's like you jump right in and things are moving at that point. The other thing is that you're able to start to immediately work on the plans that grow and improve the business. Here's the greatest thing about this. When you think about these people that are later in life, late 60s, 70s, they're thinking about retiring, they're thinking about selling their business. Most of these businesses are very good businesses and they're making money. The owner probably is not working very hard. Okay, I've met these owners. I've bought businesses from these owners. And they're not working very hard because they're at a position in their life where they're making money, the business is profitable, they're taking cash out of it, and they think, why should I worry about investing in this business? Everything's fine. I could just ride along it. That's where it's great for you because you step in with new energy, You step in with the idea of growing the business. And here's the big secret. Generally, if you ask the current owner what they would do if they were your age, I can't do that much anymore because sometimes they're younger than me. But if you ask the person, what would you do if you were my age and taking this business over? A lot of times they'll tell you. They'll say, "Oh, if I was your age and I was take this business over to grow it, here's what I would do. I would do this and I would do that." And you of course have to in your mind validate all of that. But they'll basically give you a roadmap to growth. So you have a business that's cash flow positive, it's doing okay. You step into it and you can pretty much have a growth plan in place. Or a lot of you are you're all very, very smart. You'll figure out some way to grow the company. As I mentioned, 25% of small companies are currently owned by people over 65. I know these people. Just as a side note, I'm currently, a friend of mine was sort of here, networking opportunity, I guess. So a friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, my dad has a client that's thinking about selling their business. Are you interested?" That's all I knew. But I always say yes. I'm always interested for two reasons. One, you never know what opportunities are out there. Number two, I'm just curious to hear about some of these businesses. There are so many types of businesses out there that you don't even know exist. I'm going to give you two quick examples. The first business that I bought out of Carnegie Mellon it was General Cylinder. We changed the name to McKnight Cylinder. And what we did was we recertified propane cylinders. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that propane cylinders have a 12-year life. I'll give you some tidbits that you'll be great at holiday parties this year. Propane cylinders have a 12-year life. They have to go into a DOT, United States Department of Transportation facility to be recertified, and they get another 12-year life. I didn't know that industry existed. It did. That's the first business I bought. The second, I have a banker friend who spoke at one of my classes, and she talked about this company that does dairy cattle hoof maintenance. So I guess if you could think of pedicures for cows. But apparently dairy cattle, when they come in twice a day to be milked, if their feet, if they fall over, that's bad. So the dairy cattle people, ranchers, always do maintenance on their hoofs. Somebody came up with the idea rather than the farmers doing it. They have people that drive around the dairy cattle farmers and do this maintenance work for them. So the point of that is there's these businesses that you don't even know exist that are out there. So you don't have to try and say, well, I want to buy this particular type of business or that particular type of business. You can, but be open to everything else that's out there. Okay. So there's all these businesses out there. There's basically something for everybody. A lot of people will say to me, well, should I look for a business that I have experience in? You can. But I recently, because this came up, I thought about it. And I'm not rounding. I think I've been in 10 different industries. I know it sounds like I'm rounding. Is it 9? Is it 11? No, I counted. There's 10 different industries I've been in. Most of these industries you can learn. They're very easy. The best thing about them is they all have trade groups, trade associations. So when you're doing due diligence, you're looking at a company, if you contact a trade association, you'll learn all about the industry. The other thing is to get involved with those trade associations because then you get buddies in the industry that do a couple of things. One, if there's ever a problem, you call these people and they help you. Or two, you might find other opportunities to do add-ons to your business. So there's different paths to this, and it's a matter of just working everything. But the trade industry, the trade groups, what they're good at is providing a lot of support. So I've been, right now, and I always try to get involved to the point of being on the board. So right now I'm on the board of the National Confectionery Association. I was on the North American Meat Institute board. I was on a committee for the National Propane Association. It's just a way of really understanding the industry. So don't be nervous about if you don't understand an industry. Pretty much you could figure it out. Okay. Yes, sure. That's a, I'm not going to say. People always say, well, that's a good question. That means they're thinking real hard of how to answer it. I know how to answer this one. So, financing is a very important part of this. The financing part, generally, it's good to start working as you search for a business to also be talking to investors and also to be talking to banks. Banks will fund you to a certain point. Without going into specifics, if you're all mostly business students, some of your business students, they'll usually finance 2 times cash flow, maybe 2.5 times. They also, if the business is heavy asset oriented, they could finance based on the assets. Generally, it works out to somewhere on the financing part, depending on a lot of factors, that institutions like banks will finance anywhere from 50% to maybe 60%, or let's say 40 to 60%, depending on the strength of the business. Outside of that, you need to look for investors. And by the way, the whole community exists. If you're worried, like a lot of people say, well, how much money do I have to invest? You don't really need any money. You could go out and find investors. There's a whole investor community that exists that are looking for these types of businesses, and that has grown amazingly. So the whole search process, I'll give you a quick history, and first of all, make sure I answered that person's question. Okay. The other piece that I forgot is seller debt. A lot of times you can ask the seller to loan you part of the money. So you're paying them payments over a period of time that helps finance the deal. So you can have, the stack would be bank debt, seller financing, and then equity that's put into it. So the search industry, I graduated from the Graduate School of Industrial Administration, which was the pre-Tepper days, in '94. And back then, the whole idea of doing a search fund was just getting started. A search fund is where you go out and you meet with investors and you take a period of time, the average is 2 years, and you raise money to fund your search, meaning you raise money to pay yourself a salary, health benefits, cover travel costs, things like that. And you go out and you spend 2 to 3 years searching for a business to buy. Once you find it, those people that invested in you and paid you to do this, you give them the first crack at, the option that they could buy. And then they become your investor group. Okay. So that whole process, which is the traditional search fund model, if you look up the Stanford white paper on search fund, you'll find all the information about that. Stanford every 2 years updates that white paper, which goes into a description of it as well as the successes people have had. Okay. So that all started, the Stanford people will tell you that all started right in the 90s or late 80s. They like to take credit for that. I didn't know anything about search funds. When I first found out about search funds, I thought, who would give me money to go out and find a business? There's a lot of people that'll do that. Okay. The other thing is self-funded search, where you just do this on your own. And in that case, you want to be looking for investors at the same time you're searching for a company, is to talk to people that are in family offices, high net worth individuals, people that you've worked with before that might have some money. Those are the types of people you want to let know that this is what you're looking for. And most investors of that type, they're looking to diversify their portfolio. So yes, they have money in the stock market. Yes, they have money in bonds. Yes, they might have money in some other investments, real estate, things like that. But this is another way that has become more and more popular for people with high net worth to diversify their portfolio. And they're out there. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my history lesson. So this started morphing into the search funds or people started to do the search. And then there are groups now that only fund searchers. So they raise money. There's groups out there, they go out and they raise a lot of money. And rather than search for companies that they invest in, like a typical private equity group, they will invest in searchers, people like you that are going to go out and search for a business. And ultimately they want to invest with you. Now it's even more, even further. Now there are what's called search fund accelerators. I had Tim Bavard from Search Fund Accelerator. That's the name of his company. It's searchfundaccelerator.com. He went out, raised money, and he not only supports searchers, he brings searchers inside one of his two offices, one in New Orleans, one in Denver, and he provides all the support. All you have to do is go find a company, talk to owners. He provides legal support, accounting support, mentoring support. They have cohorts, so there's like 6 or 7 that come in each year. It's to me, if I would have known about this, if that existed when I graduated from here, I would have thought that was like the ultimate because it provides everything. It is a recruiting process that he goes through, so it's not something that everybody could just jump in, but it's like, it's no different than interviewing for a job. To the next thing that has happened is now there are with these platforms, Chenmark out of Maine, Orion out of North Carolina. They do programs where they call them CXO programs. So these where they go out, find a company to buy the company, and then look for bright people like you to come in and run the company. So they might put you initially into a position that's like, they call it CXO because maybe you become chief operating officer, chief sales officer, chief something officer. That's what the X is for, or CEO. And if you're not a CEO, they'll get to know you, you get to know them. And then the next acquisition they do, they would have a feeder system to put somebody into a CEO position. I have an ex-student, I guess I should call it a former student. He didn't quit on me. A former student who's right now working for one of the Orion companies out of Cleveland. He's the CEO. I just talked to him a week ago. He's having a great time. It's an up and down type of thing. And he's going to speak at one of my classes. So there's that exists. So that was a long-winded answer to how you finance this thing. But it's its own industry now. You have a question? Okay, thank you. For the Zoom friends, I'll repeat the question. Are there particular times that you should search, like depending on what interest rates are, what the business climate is, et cetera, et cetera? Did I get the question right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. No, I think you do it when it's right for you. There's always going to be things that are going on, but there's always going to be sellers. There's always going to be people that want to sell their business. And it's just a matter of stepping in, understanding what's going on as far as economic problems, understanding interest rates and all that. But I think the right time's now. Okay. And to your point, right now, I know in my business, tariffs are driving us absolutely crazy because they're here today, gone tomorrow, raised again tomorrow, today gone. This is driving us absolutely bonkers. I mean, coffee, candy, and nuts, and we can't grow coffee in this country, um, but there's tariffs on it. So hopefully, we hear that that's going away. But anyways, no, I think you just do it when it's right. Just do it. That's, a lot of people have asked me that question, and maybe I don't think you can time it. It's almost like, people say, when's the best time to have kids? I don't know if you have kids. I have kids. It's like, when's the best time to have kids? Never. I mean, it's always, but at some point you just do it anyways, and we all survive. So yeah, I would say anytime. Any other questions? Did I answer your question? We got one on Zoom. No, it's not the most high quality business. Biz Buy Sell is an online. So the question was, where can I find businesses that are for sale? And they've tried Biz Buy Sell, which is an online platform for selling businesses, and there's not quality businesses there. That is true. However, I'll put a big asterisk because I talked to a friend of mine whose buddy in New York found a $20 million company that they just bought that was on Biz Buy Sell. That's a very big rarity. So no. So let's talk about where to find these businesses. There's two paths really to find the business. The first is to deal with brokers, business brokers. These are people that go out, talk to business owners. They're looking to sell. They do a lot of work for you. They put together a package so you could review things. They're helpful through the due diligence process, and you could buy a business that way. The issue there is you're going to be in a competitive environment. So they're going to go to everybody. And they're going to talk to everybody. They're going to they'll probably blast it out to their email list that this business is for sale. So now you're going to have a lot of competition. That said, two of the businesses that I bought, Uncle Charlie saw, well, actually, I think all three of them were through some type of intermediary. Okay. The other way, which a lot of the searchers do, and one that I advocate for, is to do what's called a proprietary search. And that's where you actually just contact business owners directly. And you just say, the idea is that you want to network with them. I don't advise hitting them over the head by saying, hey, I want to buy your business. I do a softer approach where it's send a letter, and I mean a letter, not an email. And remind me to come back to that comment in a minute. And say something like, hey, I'm starting the search process to look for a business. I'm looking to network with successful business owners like you. Is there a time that we can meet and I could tell you a little bit more about myself? Okay. So the idea there is that you want to get into this and start the network around to see what's available, because a lot of times somebody's business might not be for sale, but they know somebody whose business is for sale. So that's a path. Generally, if those people answer you, they're probably thinking about this. Okay. And then that's an opportunity for you to build a relationship with that person, be that child they don't have that wants to take over their business, and it's no competition. You had another question?
Are you find a business to raise its value and then sell it like a private equity though, or are you interested in getting the dividends or profits from this?
Okay. So the question is, in buying a business, what's the motive? Is it to grow the business and sell it like a private equity group, or is it to own it, run it, and take big dividend checks out? Okay. So the answer is yes, all of that. So here, generally, when I buy a business, people say to me, "Well, how long are you going to keep this business before you sell it?" My business partner and I live by the rule of you run the business like you're never going to sell it, because that's where you add the true value to it. And then if something comes along that makes it the right time, we sell. First business we had for 9.5 years. Typical private equity groups, investors hold for 5. We had it for 9.5 years. We sold to our biggest customer because we were so embedded with this customer that they had no choice but to buy us. Okay. So things like that. The second business I sold, there was a searcher, a former MBA student who had bought 4 processed meat businesses, had just bought a sausage company in Connecticut, was on a roll, decided that they wanted to buy Uncle Charlie's sausage from us. So it's just what's out there. It's like you talk to people and somebody gets interested, we'll listen. But we've been approached by a lot of people about buying our business. We've been approached at the How Company already by people who want to buy the business, but nothing's ever clicked. So we don't really have a formula for when we're going to sell or if we're going to sell. It's just whatever happens, happens. Did that answer the question? Okay, yes. Okay, finding business brokers. In Western Pennsylvania, there's not a whole lot. It's pretty funny. If you go to Cleveland, there's a bunch. I don't understand why. But generally, it's talking to banks and accountants, because, you could search for them, on the internet, and some might come up. But generally, banks and accountants, they know who the business brokers are. And the one theme that's going to go through my whole speech is networking. If you're looking for a business, you want to get into that kind of community, talking to bankers, talking to investors, talking to business owners. And from that, these types of questions are answered because business owners are approached by brokers all the time. There are some large brokers that are out there. I'm on threads where they send me, what they got available all the time. So they're out there and you can find them. But it's best to talk to the business community. They're the ones that really know where the brokers are. Does that answer the question? We think we got it. Yes.
Recommend moving their first or body recommend like traversing that environment.
So I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question. You did very good on how loud you're speaking. I just don't think I caught it all.
I'm interested in acquiring a business ideally back in that area. How do I network? Do I move back to the area first, or how do you recommend navigating that?
Okay, so what you're talking about, and I'm glad you brought that question up because there are really two types of searches that you can do. What you're talking about is a geographical search versus either an industry or an open search. So first, let's talk about a geographical search. If you're looking at a geographical search, and that's what I did. I wanted a 100-mile radius of Pittsburgh when I first started. So I lived here. So that's how I went around. So yes, if you're doing a geographical search, it's best to be there. Okay. If you're not there yet, visit there often. So I had a student who, he actually was our fastest searcher. He graduated in May and bought a business in September. And he did a geographical search in Seattle. His spouse was going to be doing her residency there. So he started making connections in Seattle, talked to a banker. That banker knew a person that had a business for sale. That's the business he bought. So you got to be embedded in that community. And you could do it from afar these days, but at some point you got to either visit there often or go down there and live. So that's a geographical search. Most search fund investors don't like that because they think that's limiting. So in that case, you're on your own kind of thing. Search fund investors, people that are going to invest in you and give you money to go search, prefer that you have the whole country available. That said, if you find a business in a part of the country that you're excited about, go there and make sure you can live there. I have a friend who, him and his search partner, found a business in Nowheresville, Nebraska. And I hope I don't insult anybody who's from Nebraska, but it was Nowheresville, Nebraska, population 800. And he moved there because, as his search partner said, look, I'm married. I live in Atlanta. You go. He said, okay, I'll go. He went there and he said it was very frustrating for him. Fortunately, a competitor up the street bought them 2 years into it. And, he got into a different business that he's much happier and has been wildly successful. So if you're going to do a geographical search, you want to concentrate and you want to get into that network of people. If you're not doing a geographical search and you're open to going anywhere, then just when you find something, make sure you're comfortable living there. Not only living there, but living inside the business, visiting the business and seeing what the business is like, what are the habits, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Any other questions? By the way, I have to thank you all because I don't know how many connects I've done like this. This is the most questions I've ever gotten. Usually everybody just stares at me and I talk too much. So thank you. But if you have any more questions, let me know. So to continue on, why would you do this? It's to me, it's like wonderful. And I've been doing this a long time. It's an opportunity to lead. It's an opportunity for independence. If any of you have ever worked anywhere, I'm sure you were driving sometime to work or away from work and thinking, boy, the people at the top don't know what the heck they're doing. They're just big dummies. If they would just listen to me, this would be right. Well, this is a chance for you to do all of that. Okay. You're in total control. you make the decisions, and you live with them. Okay. So I find that very rewarding. The second thing is I love the opportunity to invest in myself. So, yes, I have a 401k and all that stuff, but I would rather invest in me as opposed to somebody else. That's just the way I am. I'm in control of the operations. It makes it work like that. The other thing is, the funny thing about this is, it becomes you become it. Stay with me on this. So people long time ago used to say to me, how many hours a week do you work? I have no idea. I don't count hours. I don't know anything about hours. I just do. Okay. And I don't care. I mean, I just do as I need to. So I have no idea of that. And to me, that's independence because I can arrange my schedule to take care of things. People will say, oh, people that own their own businesses, that's all they do is work, work, work. No, I probably have the most balanced life out of anybody I know. Okay. I can balance it all. Here's the secret to that, though, too. And I don't know if it's in my slides or not. If you decide to go down this path, it's very, 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 very important that whoever your life partner is goes along with it. My wife is a champ for since the day she held up the newspaper and said with Don Jones' picture on it and said, you ought to go to this school. Maybe even before that, because we ran that little sporting goods business together. She's always been a supporter of this type and understands the way, life goes. That means sometimes arranging schedules different. That means sometimes weekends. That means sometimes all kinds of things. But she understands it, and it's part of just the way we go. Kind of I don't know if this relates to that or not, but I'll say it anyways. I thought this was very interesting. If you're familiar with who Jerry Seinfeld is, probably everybody is. Okay. He used to have a big popular TV show. He's a stand-up comedian. I saw him interviewed one time, and the interviewer said, wow, he said, when you do your stand-up routine, you pick a lot on your spouse, your wife. You like, she's like part of the routine, and you make fun of her and you make fun of your relationship and all that. And he said, the interviewer said to him, how does that go over at home? He says it goes over fine. She understands this is the family business. This is how I make my money. And to me, it just like clicked. I don't make fun of my wife or anything like that, but she understands it's the family business. This is how we do things. This is how we go along. This is how we, arrange our schedules, etc. But that's very important. I know somebody recently who spouse was not all bought in, and that made a big difference, okay, in how they operated. So that's an important thing. You look like you might have a question. I guess you could call me that. Yeah. Yeah. So we're on our fifth company that we've acquired, and but more importantly, an operator. Okay. It's more, I recently had a person speak at my class, and he made a very good observation. He said that a lot of people have this because this has become more and more prevalent in MBA schools. He said that he's sad to see that people are picking this idea of searching for a small company and running the company as a pathway to investing. So what I mean by that is he said he was at a conference recently. Oh, by the way, there are ETA conferences. Remind me about that in a minute too. And I still owe you something about emails. That's two things. He said that he was there, and he said he said it was sad to see people who had acquired a business, ran the business, exited from the business, and now they're investors and they're not going to find another business. And to me, that is sad. Don't do this as a path to becoming an investor. Go be an investor. Go work for private equity, raise a fund, do anything like that. This industry deserves, the companies deserve people who are going to operate it as operators. And if they grow it and sell it, buy another one and do the exact same thing. Okay. So I'm going to go back to two things. Well, talk about emails a minute. I brought this up earlier. If you want to contact business owners directly, first of all, business owners will talk. Not all of them, but most of them will. And I recommend sending a real letter as opposed to an email because I have 4 different email addresses. If I don't know who the email's from, I delete it. Okay. So if you want to get my attention and you want to email me, in the RE part of the email, say, Len, you told me you were going to delete this, but I attended your Connects class, and then I'll open it. But anyways, so most people are not going to respond. Some do. I shouldn't say most. A lot of searchers contact people by email. But if you want to be different, send a letter. If somebody sends me a letter and hand writes my name on it, I'll open it. And I'm at the age of people you want to communicate with. I own a business. I'm 66. I'm like your prime candidate, not Len, but my type of person is your prime candidate. And they'll pay attention to that kind of, because that's unique. That's different. It sets you apart a little bit. And I forget the other thing I was going to say. I owe you. That's all right. It'll come back to me. Okay. And if I said I'm going to come back to that and you remember, tell me. Okay. Any other
About the
questions?
conferences?
Those are great. Yes. Oh, conferences, ETA conferences. So again, the entrepreneurship through acquisition thing has become an industry. There are now conferences sponsored by schools. The first one, well, I don't know if they were first, but they're one of the biggest, is the Kellogg School and the Booth School in Chicago. So Kellogg is Northwestern, Chicago, University of Chicago is Booth. They put on an ETA conference. I think it's coming up the first week in November. It's a very good conference. It's just the giant networking thing. They have panel discussions. I went to one just to validate it. It was very good. The one I went to, which was in 2019, there were 57 investors looking for people like you that they could sponsor in a search for a business. I've heard it's now over 100 that attend this. Okay, that's where you can meet it. The other one is the one just passed. It was the first weekend in September. They do it every year. It's a bunch of it's called the Southeast. So it's Georgetown, I think Duke, University of Virginia, and maybe in North Carolina is thrown in there too. They move it around between those schools, but it's the first week of September. Same thing. My friend Tim went to it. He said it was a great conference. A lot of people there. Harvard does one. They'll do it in the fall. I think theirs is also either November, early December. I had a student who went to the Harvard one and got his 2 lead investors for his search. He eventually bought a software company. By the way, I talk about these businesses, and I started off by saying I don't have ideas, and the Carnegie Mellon's tied usually to startups and high tech. High tech, however you want to define it, there are now businesses in technology that are available for sale that have been around for 25 or 30 years. I know 2 people that have bought those types of companies, and I know one that's actually for sale right now. So those conferences exist. MIT does one in the spring. Stanford does one. I heard they like mostly to have the Stanford people there, so I don't know anybody who's attended that one. But these conferences exist as an opportunity for you to meet other searchers and, more importantly, to meet investors. So that's how this thing has grown. Okay. Did I miss? Yes, question.
Why doesn't this investment school? You have a fund, they typically look for your investment pieces, see what exactly you're talking about. This particular case, I'm just gonna go and start searching. Oh, those are boards.
Yes. Here's what all the investors tell me. They tell me the exact same thing, and I agree with them. They're looking for grit. They're looking for a commitment. If you say to an investor, I'm thinking about searching, you're done. They don't want to talk to you. You have to, here's what happened to me, and this is how you have to be. So when Don Jones said to me, Len, find an owner who's in their late 60s or in their 70s, looking to retire and doesn't have a succession plan, buy that business and grow it. That was like, the clouds parted, the beam of sun came down and hit me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, Don, can I really do that? He said, yes. And I like shook. I mean, and it became a driving force, to the point, I mean, I was here. This is a very good, well, we weren't MBAs then, we were MSIAs. Yeah, Master of Science in Industrial Administration. And, because I was here, because I had a family, I had a mortgage, I had a wife and a son and a mortgage. I decided, well, I really want to do this, but I better interview, because I'm here. I did 2 interviews. They were disastrous. I mean, the one I think lasted 11 minutes. I just, it came through. I don't want to, I don't want to do this. I mean, so you have to have this desire that this is what you're doing. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who's definitely committed to doing this. You're all smart. That part, that checks off. Okay. You're smart people. You're at Carnegie Mellon, for heaven's sakes, or wherever you're from, you're smart. So they're not worried about that. They're looking for somebody who's not going to give up. And it's very difficult to find a business. I just said it takes 2 to 3 years. I mean, you got to get up every day and just drive at this because it's hard. And that's what they're looking for. And investors, any investor, when they look at somebody, this is what an investor told me when I first started. They bet the jockey, not the horse. So in other words, they're investing in you, not necessarily the business. They got to like the business and think the business has room to grow. But more importantly, they're investing in you. And that's what you got to sell of yourself, that you're committed to this. I've had several investors tell me this. They look for a little bit of humility. You can't go in thinking you're like the greatest thing in the world, because unfortunately you're not. But you learn to get help. Mr. Rogers, who's from Pittsburgh, used to have his TV show here, lived on the corner of the Carnegie Mellon campus. He used to say, go find the helpers. Always look for the helpers. And if you're running these businesses, always look for help, because you don't know all the answers. And there's people that can help you. But that's what investors are looking for. That right there. Okay. And for those of you on Zoom, the question was, what do investors look for in a searcher or a person who's buying a business? Any other questions? Okay. Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. You missed the best part of the presentation, the beginning.
So it's kind of a large pool of capital. You come in, you acquire businesses, you elect different managers, you align those managers, they run it, you take all the cash flow back to the parent company, and you can continually deploy this type of decentralized approach.
Sure.
Which is what I would say you have is a more, I don't think it's quite at scale, because you yourself have to run these companies. Is that right? Or are you electing people into them, or?
Boy, there's a lot to answer there. So the question for the people on Zoom was, I think I got this, that to do sort of go out and make investments, put in people to run the businesses. That way you could buy a bunch of businesses and run them. Okay. Sure. That lends itself to running an investment fund. That's PE. Allison, when's that talk? Come back for that one. Because since you missed it, this is what we're talking about. This is wanting to run the company. This is wanting to be an operator. That's what I am. As far as scalability, that's what you do. You grow the business. Every business that we've acquired, we've grown.
So optimization of this is not how you make the structure.
No. I'm an operator. Somebody wanted to buy our business once, and they said, well, we want you to stick around and run it. And I said, no, I'm not. I would never do that. I'm not a good partner like that. I can't listen to somebody. Okay. I have to run the show. I have to run it. Now, that all said, I was on a podcast a couple of years ago. I was in an 18-month period, I was on 4 podcasts. And I haven't been invited back. I guess I'm not a good podcast person. But the podcast person said to me, what's your biggest success? This is when I had Uncle Charlie's Sausage. And I started thinking real fast in my head, all the things that we had done to grow the company, all the new customers, all of that. And here's what it came down to. I said, my biggest success is my management team. I said at that time, I have 3 people working with me. I love them. We work very well together. They're the ones growing this company. And all I do is referee. Literally, that's what I do. So I had an operations person, Phil. I had a finance person, Charlie, and I had Paul in sales. Here's what's even better about this story is Phil and Charlie were with me in my first acquisition when I did McKnight Cylinder. I found them. They came in and joined me, helped grow that company. When we exited, and then a few years later, found Uncle Charlie's. I called Phil and said, "Can't you come work with me?" He did. We had to get through some things. Same thing with Charlie, the finance guy, pulled him with me. So those two guys have been with me for over 25 years. The third one was Paul. I made a huge mistake at Uncle Charlie's. I needed a salesperson. I hired a very, 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 very bad person. Not bad, but not good. I mean, he wasn't a bad person, but just wasn't good at their job. And I made a mistake there because I didn't listen to my gut. Your gut will often tell you what you should do as opposed to trying to think it through. So that person didn't last too long. And then I hired Paul after that. And Paul was with me through Uncle Charlie's. Now, those three, Paul, Phil, and Charlie, are with me at George Howe. So Paul's been with me for over 11 years. Charlie and Phil have been with me for over 25 years. That's my biggest success. So kind of what you asked, do I find people? Absolutely, because I couldn't do this by myself, and I just referee between them because operations people don't like salespeople, and salespeople don't like nobody. The finance people don't, the accounting people don't like anybody because they all spend too much money. It's how we work together, but we all get along real well. Bringing them along to these companies has been great because I know how they work. They know how I work. We know what the goals are. We just jumpstart it and go. So yes, that's part of what I do is find the right people. I have to be an operator. I have to be the CEO. Okay.
If you look for certain characteristics like pricing power, different modes, whatnot.
So the question is, when I search for a company, what do I look for? I don't know. I look for it and then I discover. And as I said earlier before you were here, you don't know what's out there. I bought a company that recertifies propane cylinders. I didn't know that was an industry. I didn't know that people heat their house with propane. I thought it was only those things for your gas grill. So that was a whole new industry for me to learn. So no, I analyze every company on its own. I don't go with any predetermined anything. Any other questions? I have no idea where we are in this presentation, but the search process is long. It can take a long time. From start to finish, most people think it averages 18 to 24 months. There's a lot of targets. They're not all good, and that's what you have to search out and find is what's good deals, what are bad. The good companies, if they're on the market through a broker, they go fast. So that's why you have to have your investment people ready behind you. You have to have already talked to a bank. You have to have those kinds of things in process. You have to be able to evaluate quickly and make an offer. Okay. Oh, I think I was here. Why do it? So, I recently told somebody asked me about this job my career, and I said the biggest difference is it's high highs and lows. If you get a job and work for somebody, to me, it's like being on a merry-go-round. You do your job, do this thing. This is like a big giant roller coaster. Some days I wake up and say, what the heck did I get myself into? Why am I doing this? Twice in my life, I can remember exactly where I was twice in my career. I said to myself, why can't I just get a job and just go work somewhere? Because it's driving me crazy. But then the next day, something exciting happens and it's like, this is so much fun. I wouldn't do anything else. It is direct reward. I mean, it's your decisions, and you get rewarded for it. It's not satisfying anybody but yourself. You do have to satisfy your investors. You do have to satisfy your bank. You do have to satisfy your customers. You do have to satisfy your vendors. You do have to satisfy the people that work with you. But in the end, it's you. The other thing that has been just great is learning. I've learned so much in doing this, so much. I've learned about industries that didn't exist. I learned to really use my intuition. I told you, twice I made very bad key people hiring mistakes because I didn't listen to my gut. I made a bad mistake not too long ago, trying to figure something out. I mean, but you learn. And the other thing is having the people around me to help me make decisions is really great. I'm by nature a pretty curious person. So I like to go out and just like learn about different things and see different things, which is really fun. Should you do it? I already talked about this. Your significant other has to be all in. If you don't have a significant other, you don't have to worry about that. But if you do, they really have to understand what it is you're about to do and have to understand it. It could be a loss of some salary or benefits if you do a search on your own and just, don't work and do this full time. That's different. One of my students asked me in a class last year, said, "Well, maybe I'd rather, work for a company that like has prestige or something like that." That was kind of the level. And I said, well, yeah, you can work for a company that has prestige. Pick one, Amazon, Microsoft, I don't know. And I said, or you could be the CEO. I mean, you can go be the, director of something, or you could be somebody in an organization, or you can run it. And it was funny, shortly after that, I had some speakers in. And it was a person who was a searcher, a person who had acquired a company and was running it, and it was a person from the fund that sponsored the searcher who who was sponsoring the searcher and also did the investment that the person bought the CEO in. I asked all three of them, what did they do before? All three of them, this is where they worked. The first one, who was the searcher, she worked at Goldman Sachs. The second one, who was running a small company as a CEO and bought it, she worked for Chevron. The third one, I always forget where she worked in an investment firm, but everybody knew it. It's some big group that's out of New York City or something. And now she's investing in these searchers. She's part of the Women's Search Network. So I said to these people, because my student was there, so why'd you leave Goldman Sachs? That's like a pretty prestigious organization. She told me all the reasons why she didn't want to work there. Same thing with Chevron. So it's a different thing. You're all smart. I figure you can do this. You got to have the passion that you want to do it, but you figure things out. The smart part, that's what you do. And then, like I said, you find helpers, advisory boards, things like that, people in the industry that can help you. You do have a loss of colleagues, but you get different colleagues. I had a speaker in my class this semester, Alex. He just bought a company. He just bought a company this past January or February. And he's all excited. And he was at my class and he said, one of the things that's different for me is that I don't have, people that are my peers. And so I took that to heart and I called him the next day. I said, Alex, you have to go get peers. You have to find other people that are running small companies. Those become your peers and find those types of people that are around here and start to work with those people because it's a different peer set that makes it very different. I also think it's the benefit of having a significant other who understands this. So a lot of times my wife becomes my sounding board because there's things that are going on in the business that you can't talk to people in the business because you might scare them or wig them out or something like that. You have to have that out there. Small company, you can have a lack of departments, You don't have treasury, you don't have marketing, sometimes it's all you. Use your intuition, that keeps coming up. Decisive. Sometimes you can't wait to get all the information. The fun thing about small companies is you make decisions, you take in as much information, you don't make, decisions on the fly, but you gather the information and do it. There's certainly a lot of energy. It's constantly selling. It's selling to your employees. It's selling your investors. It's selling your board. And I guess more it's communicating as opposed to selling. And I have to say, once you do one, to me, I don't know how you go back. I mean, this friend of mine, Tim, said he found people that became investors. The people that I know that have been doing this and have been successful, some of them are on their second companies. It's just like it's way too much fun, I think, is the way I look at it. Investors, friends, and family, be very, very careful. Grandma loves you. Grandma will write you a check probably, but just remember, it's grandma. And families, I always say make sure that whatever you do with your family and money, make sure it survives the holiday test. Can you all go to the holiday dinner together and, not be cranky at one another? So be careful there. But the other investors, former business associates who know you, people you've worked with, business owners. Business owners are great investors because business owners own businesses. They know that this works, and they know that there's opportunity in this. High net worth individuals, a lot of high net worth individuals are former business owners or current business owners, or just people that have money that are interested in diversifying their portfolio. Family offices are usually families that have had some big success and sold a business for a lot of money. Search fund funders, I mentioned those people. There are now search funds that only fund searchers. We have one here in Pittsburgh, GTE. They're looking to invest in searchers. They're looking to invest in businesses searchers find. So they're out there. The key to it all is just network, talk to everybody. And I talk about networking, whether you look to buy a business or not, networking works. If you're in a field and you pick a field, get to know everybody in that field. Talk to everybody in that field. Talk to competitors. Everybody's always afraid of competitors. I generally know all my competitors, okay? You're all in this together. Now, you can't fix pricing and do things illegal, and you got to be a little guarded so they don't steal your customers. But it's always good to know what everybody's thinking because, we're all in the same thing. And I don't know if I mentioned network through this at all, but you should always be networking wherever you are. Investors, can you work with them? Investors interview you. You ask the question, what do they look for? You have to make sure you can work with them. Okay. I think one of the probably crummiest things would be to do is to work with somebody you don't really like that much. That would be awful. So when you're looking for investors, make sure they're people that you can work with. What else do they bring? Can they be a sounding board? Can they do introductions? Do they have bank relationships? Other investors. If you get an investor in, the last question should always be, do you know anybody else who might want to invest in this deal? Professionals, attorneys, accountants, those people. Sellers, the sellers, you want to be able to judge how they are as a character as well. I mean, I've looked at businesses that I've turned down the business just because of the caliber of the seller. Businesses, both of them were very good. How they ran them and the practices they did, I couldn't live with. So I went away from that. Can the investors bring you people that are selling businesses? They know people too. Support. A lot of investors will want to be on the board of directors. That's okay. But make sure you control how the board works. And they also can be people that can help you run the company early on. The first thing I had to do one time after I bought a business, the first business, had to fire somebody. I'd never fired anybody. Actually, when we bought McKnight Cylinder, I never had employees in my life because I had a mom and pop business before that. It was just me and my wife. And I had to fire somebody. I never did this. And by the way, it's the worst part of this whole journey I'm on is I hate that. I hate when I have to let somebody go. But you do have a commitment to the business, to your other people that work there, to your customers, to your vendors, to your investors, to your bank, to everybody, to yourself. And sometimes people have to go, but that's the hardest part. And I didn't know how to do this. And I called one of my board members and said, Ron, I don't feel too comfortable. What do I do? And he explained to me a lot of things that helped me get through that, that I, still use today. Search, people ask where to find them. Investment bankers, business brokers, we talked about that. Professionals like CPAs, financial planners, attorneys. A lot of times they have clients that are looking to sell. Direct contact, which is contacting businesses directly, business owners directly. You can start with a thesis. In other words, certain industries that you want to look at. It's hard to just take every industry and start contacting people. So I always say start with maybe 3 or 4 industries, get lists, contact those business owners. But they'll lead you to other things. So the one person I mentioned earlier who had a software firm, he was, his goal was to buy a business service business like elevator, service, HVAC service, ductwork cleaning service, those types of business, they end up buying a software company. So it can lead to from one thing to another. Again, networking works the best to find businesses that are out there. Talk to everybody. Talk to everybody, let them know what you're doing. I've talked about search as an industry. We went through that. That's how I jump around. And that's it. Any more questions? All right. Here's the last thing I'll leave you with. I tell everybody this. If I talk to you about this, like you take my class, you come to the Connects class, or I guess this isn't a class. So you come to the Connects, what is this? Seminar. Yeah, we'll call it Connect Seminar. If I'm yours for life. Okay. I love this stuff. If you decide you're seriously about this stuff and some of the things I've talked about today, you want more information on, certainly get in touch with me. I'd be happy to talk to you. I've talked to people who are my former students. I've talked to people who are my former students' friends from other schools. I talked to somebody who was like graduated from Cornell and another one that graduated from somewhere in Ohio. I've talked to people who have contacted the Swartz Center and said, "Hey, I'm a Tepper alumni. I'm interested in finding a business for sale." This group usually sends them to me. So if you want to talk, I'd be happy to talk with you. Okay. Any last questions? You were great. It was the most questions I ever had. I lost count. So thank you very much for attending. If there's waffles left, please take some for the road. Thank you.